Roti, kapda aur makan. The slogan might be corny, but it really never gets outdated, does it? Welcome everyone to Let's Talk Money. Today on the show, ahead of the union budget, our focus. What can the finance minister do to ensure every Indian has roti, kapda aur makan? 5 announcements, 3, 4, 5. The number is irrelevant, but we need to know what should we look out for. The announcements which have the potential to accelerate India's growth and ensure a more prosperous future for everyone. And then there was a much talked about Make in India event in Mumbai. Why do we need to decode it on Let's Talk Money? Because the manufacturing sector as a percentage to GDP has remained stagnant for the last 5 years, and reviving manufacturing is the key for India's youth for getting jobs. I'm joined by Sajid Chinoy, India economist, JP Morgan. Also here with me in Delhi, NK Singh, former member, Parliament and senior member of BJP. The BJP-led government, Mr. Singh, came to power in 2014, with a mandate to fix a faltering economic growth. But today, if I talk to businesses or I talk to an Aam Aadmi, he's not seeing much change. So, Mr. Jaitley has a big agenda cut out for him, doesn't he?
Well, I think that all finance ministers have a big agenda in the budget-making process. Of course, this is an exceedingly important budget. This is Mr. Jaitley's, and as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned, an exceedingly important inflection point on whether the growth momentum of the Indian economy will be further catapulted, whether private investment would be rekindled, whether enhanced public outlays will be able to piggyback more private investment coming in, and whether the benefits of the growth can really begin to affect in a gainful way India's agriculture, as India's agricultural productivity needs to be substantially enhanced, and the benefits of the growth trickle down to India's rural economy, since rural demand has tended to remain somewhat sluggish.
So Mr. Singh, what is it that you would be looking for? What do you want? I mean, if I were to look as a common person and say these are the 3 announcements I would be very, very happy with, what would these 3 announcements be?
Well, I think that, let me put it this way to you, that it has to be a slew of announcements. First and foremost, whether the current growth momentum can be further accelerated.
Okay.
Because growth is a necessary, I agree, but not a sufficient condition for all-inclusive growth. But certainly, growth is an overarching theme which has the highest impact in terms of poverty amelioration, improving per capita income, enhancing rural demand, and the rest of it. So that's the first, whether the growth momentum is being sustained or not. Second big announcement is whether India, as a competitive destination, as a manufacturing destination, in terms of rekindling of demand, is really that part of the competitiveness of the Indian economy, and on the ease of doing business, the budget gives a new fillip to that ongoing process and initiatives which are going on. And the third I would certainly be looking for is definite measures to accelerate the growth process in India's economy, particularly the rural sector and the rural economy, which has lagged behind on account of 2 successive poor monsoons. And what it can do to India's rural economy is something I'd be certainly looking for.
All right, Sajid, so we've got 3 big things from Mr. Singh here. Growth overall, but the momentum to be sustained, manufacturing sector and ease of doing business, a clear indication that this path that the government has taken will be continued on, and reviving the rural sector. What would you want to hear from the finance minister?
Manisha, I think it's just important to understand the fine balancing act that the finance minister is walking. All of us want higher growth, all of us want higher public investment, all of us want higher outlays. But remember, the government has a fiscal consolidation roadmap that it needs to adhere to, not for any ideological reason, but just to ensure that interest rates and borrowing costs in this economy stay contained. I think the more fiscal consolidation we have, the more you will have space for monetary policy to ease rates, and the more borrowing costs in general for consumers, for businesses will remain contained. So the challenge for him is, how do I provide a growth impetus while also sticking to some modicum of fiscal consolidation? That's the ultimate nub of the problem. What I would like to see is a continued focus on public investment. I think the government, to its credit, has walked the talk the allocations this year went up by 25% in terms of public investment, and year to date they're running above that. So we'd like to see much more public investment on the expenditure side. You would want to see more safety nets and more rural investment for the agricultural economy. We're coming off back-to-back droughts. There's a lot of rural stress, but you want to do so in a manner that's non-inflationary, and you want to see on the revenue side, a fairer, more predictable tax regime, both for corporates and for citizens. So these are big asks, but for me, fundamentally, the question is, how do you provide more public investment while also sticking to fiscal consolidation? And therefore, the key for that for me is asset sales. I want to see a 5-year roadmap on disinvestment that's credible, realistic, which will create the resources to boost public investment and still not force the government to deviate from its fiscal consolidation path. So those are the 3 or 4 things I would look for.
So Sajid, what I'm hearing is that government has to open its purse strings. I mean, even though fiscal consolidation is a big challenge, if I look at the IIP numbers, we all know that they fell 1.3% in December after a revised 3.4% decline in November. And that's, if you look at the investments per se, the numbers aren't looking very good. Fresh investments fell by 74% in December. So if private sector's not going to let's say, accelerate its investments, are you saying that the government has to start investing in a big way?
What I'm saying is exactly right. The GDP numbers may paint a certain rosy picture of the economy, but if you look at all the other corroborating evidence, whether it's corporate earnings, capital investment, stalled projects, new project announcements, private investment is weak and will remain weak for the foreseeable future, given some of the balance sheet constraints that both corporates and banks are faced with. So yes, what I'm saying is you will need more public investment, not just this year, over the next 3 or 4 years, hopefully to crowd in private investment. But the key is to do the public investment without causing the fist to go berserk, which is to stick to your fiscal consolidation path. And therefore, what I'm asking for is an asset swap, that the government begin to seriously examine all the assets on its book, to do disinvestment more aggressively, more creatively, and use those proceeds to build roads, bridges, ports, highways, because then you get the public investment and you get the fiscal consolidation that will bring borrowing costs down in the economy.
All right. Mr. Singh, so it's a balancing act, but here's my question to you. On disinvestment, the government hasn't had much of a success. Now you have stock markets which are bleeding. The environment is so poor. You have banks where the government has tremendous holdings which need more capital infusion rather than government actually being able to get some monies out of it. So how will this balancing act be met? I mean, is there a magic wand that Mr. Jaitley has, or this is going to be a tough one?
Well, I rather like the drift of Chinoy's argument that we can't go berserk on the fiscal consolidation map. But that does not rule out really that, without being a fiscal fetishist, a recalibration at the margin, even at the cost of some amount of impairment of credibility, is important to sustain higher public investments, particularly infrastructure. It is a balancing act, no doubt, as you said. And I think that really a lot of credit has to be given that this year, notwithstanding other pressures, the fiscal consolidation targets are likely to be met. The issue is really the next year's fiscal consolidation target. I would really prefer those fiscal consolidation targets to remain what they were given in last year's budget. But if there is a very minute recalibration and that slack is met by some other non-tax revenues, one of which is disinvestment. Of course, the timing of the disinvestment is exceedingly important, because given the volatility of the stock market behavior, I think that a medium-term disinvestment plan is really more credible. But I agree with Chinoy that the fiscal consolidation map is an important issue to retain the credentials of India's economic fundamentals.
Okay, so Sajid, here's what I'm hearing. So this is, of course, at a very, very macro level. Everybody wants the government to spend more, revive the investment environment, and therefore lead to that, multiplier effect. having said that, the market global volatility may not even allow them to probably look at divesting certain assets and increase their kitty. So you also talked about fairness in the tax regime. What would that mean? Would that mean that you bring down both corporate tax rates and also look at linking income rates or personal income rates to inflation?
So, Manisha, just a couple of things, just on the asset sale part. I think if we look at this as selling assets and selling your family silver, then we'll always worry that this is not the right time, valuations are very low, commodity prices are very low. We should think of this as an asset swap, that you're selling some assets on the public sector balance sheet to build and buy other assets. And to the extent that you're selling stake in commodity companies whose valuations have fallen, but at the same time you're using those very resources to build public infrastructure whose costs have also fallen because commodity prices are much lower now, you've got some sort of a price hedge. So I think we need to think of this more holistically as a swap, not a sale, and then some of these price concerns go away. Point in taxes, I think the government made an excellent start last year by announcing they would bring the corporate tax down to international levels and at the same time close exemptions. So what I'd like to see is the first down payment made on that front, where some exemptions are closed and the tax rate is gradually brought down. But that's the kind of stuff we need, a tax regime with fewer exemptions. You grow the base and that over time allows you to gradually bring the tax rate down. All that said, I completely agree with Mr. N.K. Singh that the foundations of our macro stability in the last 3 years have been founded on fiscal consolidation. The states will be under some challenge next year because they have interest to pay on their bonds. They'll have state pay commissions. So it's very important the center broadly stick to its fiscal consolidation path. And therefore, this year, there is really no scope for any tax breaks for the common person, so to speak, given the balancing act the finance minister has to walk.
All right, so don't expect any tax breaks. But overall, if the economy grows and we do see some of those big announcements, I think that itself will be a very, very welcome move. On the other side, ambitious campaigns like Make in India have been rolled out. The ultimate yardstick for its success, though, will be the employment it will generate. Today, we have a situation where of the 11 million students graduating from colleges each year, only 20% get jobs relevant to their skill sets. Both our experts, their take on that particular matter when we return. The one big event which made headlines was the Make in India Week held in Mumbai. A boost to manufacturing sector is crucial because that's the only key to solving India's unemployment needs of tomorrow. Look at the statistics. According to experts, only 10% of the Indian workforce is in the organized sector. Of the 11 million students graduating from colleges each year, only 20% get jobs relevant to their skill sets. United Nations estimates suggest that changing demographics will give India an additional 300 million people in the working age group. That's 15 to 64 years between 2010 and 2040. So how many jobs do we need to create? We need to create 10 million jobs every year for the next 10 years. How many do we create currently? We generate about 2 million a year. So that's the gap, Mr. Singh, that we need to cover. And that's the reason why Make in India has become one of the biggest campaigns of this government. So far, though, success has been very limited.
But it takes time before there are leaps and lags in the system. But the foundations are being laid in a very credible way to do 3 things. First, I think if you look at the Make in India campaign, the overall overarching theme is to improve the overall competitiveness of the economy, the overall efficiency with which the factors of production are being used, and that, I think, in a combination with a lot of other measures which the government is taking, particularly in terms of empowering the small and medium sector by some special initiatives to make finances available, is a very important credible step. Combine that with Skilling India and a digital platform in which government governance is done, and look at a combination of all these measures which are being taken, it certainly lays the foundations for a big growth and a burst of the entrepreneurship in small and medium. Combine it with the new initiatives of using platforms of enabling venture capital funds to really have a startup.
Sajid Chinoy, I mean, I'm looking at some of the numbers, December quarter numbers, and saying investments fell by 74%. And then you also look at FDI inflows and you say they've increased by 48%. In fact, Mr. Singh, before we started the show, said that while he was a speaker at Make in India conference in Mumbai, he actually saw a lot more excitement amongst the foreign participants than anybody who participated from India. Why this dichotomy?
So a couple of things. I think let's understand that these are difficult times for manufacturing globally, right? This is not just India that is struggling. There's so much excess capacity globally for manufacturing, particularly emanating out of China, that it's going to be hard to get new investments in manufacturing, not just in India, but anywhere around the world at this point in time. And you're seeing around the world, the service sectors, for example, in China, in the US, are doing much better than industry and manufacturing. That said, I think what I like about Make in India is it becomes a focal point or a rallying point to do the things we need to do in any case. And what are the 2 or 3 big things? There's a big push on public infrastructure that will be needed for us to become competitive. There's a big push on education and skilling, which is going to be needed for us to become competitive. There's a big push on making it easier for business to set up and the ease of doing business. These are all great things to have no matter who buys those products. So a few years from now, whether Make in India, whether the provision of public infrastructure and skilling is used by the manufacturing sector or the services sector, whether it's used to produce goods that are consumed domestically or externally, doesn't matter. What matters is these things will increase total factor productivity, which is good for India's growth in the medium term. So that's the part that I like about Make in India. It becomes a rallying point to do these must-haves in any case.
All right, let's conclude on that note. Both panelists here kind of happy and positive about the Make in India campaign. Just one last question before we wrap up, Mr. Singh. Ease of doing business. Here you get another big headline that Vodafone gets, a notice from IT, income tax, while you are at the same time having a Make in India conference and a campaign in Mumbai. So why is it that our departments and our government don't seem to be talking to each other? Why this confusion?
I think very frankly, anecdotal evidence of this kind makes big headlines. But if you look at it really, the chap who has issued the notice is only doing his job diligently. There are procedures in the Indian system. There are enough checks and balances. But I think giving India a fair, transparent tax regime is something to which this government is firmly committed to.
Sajid Chinoy and Mr. Singh, thank you very much for joining me here on Let's Talk Money. Last week, we'd also asked you to send in your question, your wish list for the budget, and Vasu has given 3 things on his wish list. This was the best that we received. Relax income tax slab so as to boost the household savings. Mr. Finance Minister also check inflation control measures, especially food inflation index. And the third thing that Vasu has asked the Finance Minister for is, along with steps taken for ease of doing business for corporates, the FM should also focus on ease of living for citizens. And of course, we've received several mails with your portfolios. We will get experts and India's top financial planners to answer them. Meanwhile, do keep writing into us, money@ndtv.com. I'll be back with you same time next week. Goodbye.